Edge, East Wind in Paradise, by Carl Jackson. Chapter 2, The Last of the Rum. The northeast trade winds sweep 3,000 miles across the Atlantic before they hit the coconut and casuarina trees that guard the silver beaches of Barbados. Promotion brochures call the island Paradise Island and Island in the Sun. The English came to the island in 1625. Cotton, sugar, and African slavery came a few years later. Independence followed in 1966. Edge and Ben Jones sat in Ben's rum shop at Fustic Corner, drinking and having lunch. Independence been around for a long time, but I don't know if it changed things much, Ben was saying. Don't get me wrong, the young people getting big money, new cars, regular shopping trips to Miami, but the island still isn't theirs. Edge took a bite out of his lunch and washed it down with ice water. The afternoon sun sent ripples of heat dancing above the asphalt road in front of the shop. A plane roared overhead. The engines changed pitch as the pilot cut his speed for the final run into Grantley Adams International Airport. The old colonial shadow still falls over Barbados. The white people still own Bridgetown. The Brits and the Canadians own the banks and hotels, and the economy relies on foreign investment more and more every day. Edge looked up from his plate. I'm not so sure what you're talking about is unique to Barbados. The politicians and the economists are in their pockets too, Ben said. We have so much of them on the island that you can't throw a rock in Bridgetown without it hitting an economist and bouncing off and cutting a politician. You know that one of them politicians even changed the name of the village he born in from Pennyhole to Gemswick? He say that wick is the Old English for village. What is he, some kind of nut? Ben shrugged. He filled Edge's glass with more water and ice. How's tourism going? Asked Edge. We're getting a lot of tourists, and why not? Their dollar is worth 2 of ours. Rum is cheap, sun is free, and the Beach Boys are young and strong. Edge waited. The Beach Boys here are priceless, started Ben. They with women all night, sleep late, pop vitamin pills, and drink linseed. Some of them so organized that they only take women who got preferences. You're kidding, Edge said. You don't know this thing, Ben said. The women go back and tell their girlfriends, and they come down and ask for these same boys. Sometimes them picture come down before them. The new entrepreneurial class. Edge smiled. Ben was talking again. The wife does put she husband on the golf course and on the deep sea fishing boat, and she in the room loading. The husband does put the wife on the beach to tan, and he in the room loading the maid. Seriously, Ben, Edge asked, how widespread is this thing? I mean, everybody that come down here ain't part of the package, Ben sipped his drink. I hear we found oil in St. Philip, Edge said. Oil and gas, Ben said. A little girl came into the shop. She ordered 50 cents in biscuits. Ben dispatched her and came and sat down again and poured another drink. Doctor stopped me from drinking this thing, he said. But I can't mind heat. He looked at Edge over the top of his glass. Man, you don't know how glad I is to see you, he said. It's good to see you too, Ben, Edge said. There were a lot of things about the island that Edge hadn't realized he missed. Things like the laughter and the warmth of the people and that special feeling of belonging. I don't feel too bad for an old man, Ben said. Of course, I got to leave the women alone nowadays. Yeah, Edge said. I believe you. You leave women alone, not you. Those gray hair might fool some people, but they can't fool me. Ben laughed. We got a lot of drinking to catch up on. You ever went across to the continent while you were in England? went across a few times, Edge said. It was okay. Edge stared into the bottom of his glass of water. He had picked up the Dover-Ostend ferry one afternoon, then thumbed his way to the Mediterranean. He had planned to travel down beyond the Sahara, but war stopped him in Port Said. He spent a year there before going back to England and meeting Tamora. It was months before he realized that she was an agent for the Kenyan government. She was in London gathering intel on Sudanese rebels that were mounting attacks on southern Sudan through Kenya. Their relationship brought Edge to the attention of the SPLA. If it wasn't for an SPLA agent pulling him out of a deadly situation with some Sudanese muscle, he may not have made it back from England. Edge's mind drifted once more. If it's an assassin you're looking for, you've come to the wrong man. The High Commissioner shook his head. No, he said, not that. We're setting up an intelligence bureau, something quite small and compact, responsible to the Prime Minister. Edge studied the man behind the desk. The High Commissioner was about 60. He had a cropped mustache, dark-framed glasses, and hair that was just beginning to turn gray. Annoyance flickered briefly in the eyes behind the glasses and was gone. The smooth face was as bland as before, and the eyes held only a weary patience. The High Commissioner raised his right hand to his temple. It was a soft, long-fingered hand with polished nails and rings on the fingers. He rubbed his fingers gently to the hair at his temple. He leaned back and closed his eyes, the hard-pressed diplomat knocking himself out in the service of his country. Edge felt almost sorry for him. They were in the office of Franklin Somerset, High Commissioner of Barbados to Britain, Cyprus, and Australia, and Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary to France, Sweden, Norway, Israel, Turkey, and the European Community. Somerset's eyes fluttered open. A smile flickered across his face. It wasn't a smile, really, Edge thought. It was more a sudden, fleeting change of expression that broke the wide expanse of smooth-jowled urbanity. Let me give it to you from the top, he said. The Caribbean is changing fast. There's global terrorism, drugs, mafia money, multinational corporations. There's also interest from China and the CIA. Our traditional law enforcement agencies cannot deal with these things. The Defense Force is a part-time affair. Its members shoot off blank ammunition on national holidays and go to camp once a year. That's about it. The police have been trained to track down petty criminals and nothing more. Somerset paused and rubbed his temple again. Of course, there's also a special branch in the National Intelligence Committee. The Prime Minister is scrapping the committee. All it ever does is push paper. Somerset stared at a painting of an old Barbadian sugar mill on the opposite wall. The CIA has its fingers all through the region and into South America tracking drug running, elections, and political groups, he said. We can't rely on foreigners to keep us informed anymore. It's time we looked after ourselves. Have you looked around the post office? Edge asked. Somerset pursed his lips. We combed the civil service. We didn't have any luck. Who's the man in charge? We brought in a man on contract, Somerset said. Fellow named Hervey, ex-MI6, used to head the Caribbean nation of the British Secret Service at one time. Somerset's finger traced an invisible pattern on a folder that lay on his desk. I know what you are thinking, he said, but there are a couple of things. The British are no longer an imperial power and so are unlikely to mount operations in the Caribbean. Hervey has the experience and the background to get his idea going. And he is on contract. If you take the job, you're number 2 until he goes. Somebody put you on to me, Edge said. Who? Somerset tapped the folder on his desk. It's all here, he said. Paratroopers, London transport, school, your time in Kenya. Everything you've done since coming to London. Everything that matters, that is. Well, at least I got some of it right, Edge thought. You still haven't answered my question, he said. Somerset lit a cigarette. He blew smoke through his nostrils and looked past Edge at a spot on the wall. Scotland Yard, he said. If they had anything on you, you bet your life they would have come after you. Edge shrugged. He didn't really care. With tomorrow gone, that old restless feeling was hitting him again. I'll take the job, he said. The Bureau's cover name is Sterling Industrial Consultants, and the office is on Roebuck Street. The local CIA is our first target, Hervé was telling Edge. Hervé was tall and thin, with a bony face, jutting nose, and silver hair brushed straight back from his forehead. He wore a cream t-shirt and a navy blue tie. Edge waited. Special Branch had already told him that the political officer at the embassy was the CIA man on the island. I was thinking about the field office, Hervé said. The man at the embassy is chiefly liaison. They couldn't risk him in a clandestine op. They stuck a tail on one of the known CIA agents, and he led them to others, and they in turn to people higher up. After 3 months of possibilities, they were down to 4. A university professor on contract from Northwestern University, a missionary, a retired American businessman, and the general manager of an American subsidiary. The computer eliminated the missionary and the retired businessman. The other 2 were put under long-range surveillance. 3 weeks later, Edge was ready. Adel Firkin, Caribbean Imports, Hervé said. And from the look of these transcripts, he is regional coordinator as well. The next day, a man phoned the police and told them a bomb was planted in Minerva House. Caribbean Imports was on the 2nd floor of Minerva House. The bomb disposal squad spent 4 hours inside the building. Edge, Hervé, and Adel Firkin sat in the conch shell in Bridgetown. Adel Firkin said, "Make it quick, you guys." "I'm offering you a job," Hervé said. "Tell me another," Firkin said. "I like to laugh." Firkin had pale blue eyes, and his ears stood out from his head like sails in a strong breeze. The Bureau had taken a week to sift through the information Edge had taken from the safe in Firkin's office. "You're finished here," Hervé told Firkin. Firkin had been reaching for his drink when Hervé spoke. He pushed the glass away. A shadow crossed his face. "That bomb scare," he said. "That was arranged for my benefit." Hervé ignored the comment. "They're going to love you in Washington when they hear you've been blown," he said. Hervé studied the back of his hands. "Of course, since we are both more or less on the same side," he said, "we can dispense with the unpleasantness." He looked at Firkin. Hervé's accent reminded Edge of British officers in World War II films. The air of Waterloo, fish and chips, and 900 years of Anglo-Saxon culture hamming it up for the yokels, he thought. "All we want is your cooperation," Hervé was saying. Firkin's head jerked like a stable horse scenting smoke. "You're out of your cotton-picking mind," he said. "I'm not asking you to betray anybody," Hervé said quietly. "You have access to information we don't even know exists. I'm just asking you to be neighborly. Anything you feel we ought to know, tell us. I want us to be friends, that's all." Firkin leaned back in his chair. He tried hard to contain the relief that showed on his face. "Anything I pass on to you guys will have to be okayed from Washington first," he said. "Of course," Hervé said. "I quite understand that." "Any news on Fogel?" It was Edge. "Play him gently," Hervé had said. "Don't lean on him too hard. We don't want him to panic. We want him on our side, but we don't want to put him up against a wall." Fogel was a freelance gun. The intelligence services threw him the jobs that were too dirty for their own people. Between jobs, he worked part-time as an enforcer for the Mafia King, controlling the Montego-Bay-Fort Lauderdale drug run. He was suspected of killing one of Firkin's men in Antigua. The agency had said, "Get Fogel." Firkin had become perfectly still at the mention of Fogel's name. "Get Fogel," Hervey said gently, "and they'll make you a general or whatever." He held Firkin's gaze. "I'll trade him with you, but I won't give him to you for free." The silence lasted a long time. Finally, Firkin said, "You've got a deal." "He'll be on the yacht Nymphette, leaving Caracas for St. Lucia Thursday next week," Hervey said. "He's yours." "How did you find Fogel?" Edge asked. He and Hervey were walking back to the car. "The director of the Caribbean station of the British service is an old friend of mine," Hervey said. "Fogel used to do the odd job for him before he went bad." "Before who went bad? Your friend or Fogel?" "What's the matter with you? You fingered Fogel, stuck him aboard a yacht, and now Firkin's waiting for him," Edge said. Hervey shrugged. "Fogel knows the rules. A hatchetman has no friends." Firkin sent Edge a bottle of bourbon whiskey a week later. Edge knew the Fogel case was closed. He came out of a restaurant, and there was a package on the seat of his car. The doors were still locked. There was no sign of forcing. He was dealing with a pro. That ruled out any possibility of a bomb. He untied the package. There was a phone inside with a note. The note read, "Gravesend, tomorrow, 1300 hours." Firkin hadn't bothered to sign it. A dozen Sun and Fun fanatics from up north were toasting themselves on beach towels. A few heads bobbed by the blue-green water. The line of yachts riding at anchor beyond the breakers hardly seemed to move. Firkin would be on one of them, he guessed, with a full supply of martinis and suntan lotion. He turned on the phone. It was 1 o'clock. The phone rang, and Edge answered it. "You're having a visitor," Firkin said. "Bandit, Barracuda Reef." He gave Edge the date and time. "Nothing much ever happens here," Ben's voice snapped Edge back to the present. "Nothing much ever happens. Not like in them big countries." "Yeah," Edge said. "It's real quiet here." He finished his water and stood up. "Got any Moby left?" he asked Ben. Ben reached under the counter for a glass. He filled it with Moby from a cooler in the corner. "Best Moby this side of Canaan," he said. "Good for the heat. Cool you down real good." "How much do I owe you?" Edge asked. "This was my treat," Ben said. "You buy next time." "Well, what can I say?" "Don't say nothing, man. Come around again soon." They shook hands, and Edge went down the steps to the car.